Welcome to Queued Up with Ziz and Pam. We are so happy to have a special guest, Peter Hostrawser. Peter Hostrawser is an innovative education specialist. For 20 years, he has been driven to connect with academia and reality, or let me say academia to reality. Ooh, I need to hear more about that one. He is also the host podcast of Disrupt Education, highlighting journeys outside the traditional education system and educational reformers. He is also the co-founder of HallPass Education, an educational think tank specializing in innovative educational solutions designed to guide people through their hallway of life. Welcome, Peter.
It's great. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. It's an honor, man. I love the podcast. Here we go.
Okay, great. Well, actually, we're so interested to hear from your perspective, not only as somebody who's a practitioner in the field of teaching, but in particular, how you put the Disrupt Education podcast in this traditional system, and why. Why did you start that podcast? How is it going as a teacher in a traditional system with that kind of mentality and podcast? Love to hear about it.
That's a great question, and I get that asked a lot. Disrupt has such a negative connotation to it sometimes, and it's actually a positive connotation in this kind of area where I started. I started Disrupt Education, I think it was 2016. I don't know, the years are flying by. I'm in my 20th year of being inside the traditional education system in the high school area, and I've taught business all those years. And over the years, you know how things change, technology changes, all these, it gets easier and easier to find knowledge. And somewhere in there, we started to get away from connecting with people, connecting with students, connecting with other educators. And I just saw this huge gap happening. And in that gap, it seemed like more and more students were walking around like zombies in my high school. They were just kind of like going through the flow. My personal story is I just kind of went through it, man. I checked the boxes. I did my thing. And it was okay, on to the next thing. Then I did it through college. And then after college, I was like, what's going on? So I wanted to change something. And I got really bold one day and thought I can disrupt the entire system, right? Right before I started that, though, I got a chance to talk to a buddy of mine, Tyrone Williams, who is a history teacher at Oak Park River Forest High School. Huge shout out to the guy. He's nowhere to be found on social media, but man, this guy is awesome. And we put a trip together to take kids over to Europe. In Oak Park, we have pretty much a diverse population. We have anything and everything that you can think of there. And we wanted to take a fabric of the entire village and have them go on this trip, which was very expensive. So we raised money and did all these things. And it was an NEF tour where education came in. So basically what happened was we got to sit in the same room at the end of this amazing trip across Europe with Sir Ken Robinson, who is a ginormous fan of mine. I'm an enormous fan of his. I hope he's a fan of mine. Sorry, let me correct that.
I'm sure he will be.
It's been a long day. It was design thinking, and the kids really started to get into it. They started taking over, like, how can we actually change schools? And, the adults there, and there were kids all over the world, and they were just building this. And I'm like, what if I take this and start asking our community that I was in at the time, it was Oak Park and River Forest, what is it? Like, what is it that you would change? And that's literally how Disrupt Education started to grow. And then what I did with the students who wanted to change something, whether they are freshman through senior, is I brought them into a club. It was kind of an underground club, if you will. And we started talking about, okay, what is it that you want to change? And I started helping them build that with a lean startup. And it was kind of an entrepreneurial look. And then some of my older students started connecting and saying, hey, this is cool. Can I come in and talk? And so we created a podcast. So that's where it all began. I know it was a long story, but man, I have been called a disruptor in a good way for many years now. And boy, we're really being disrupted right now. So
we sure are.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So I was checking out your Twitter feed the other day and I came across the tweet where you said, I have a strong feeling that being a teacher this year for me is going to be one of my greatest years ever.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, I'm not sure what Chicago's doing, if you all are going to be online or virtual or in person or hybrid thereof, but I love the fact that you're looking at this as a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's, I am in kind of like a very small area of teachers who are excited about this. In Chicago, it depends on what school you're in, right? So CPS went virtual, the entire school system in CPS, Chicago Public. Around, I'm in the burbs, I'm in the South Burb now. Shout out to Stagg High School. Just started there, excited. And we are actually going virtual until September 21st. We're going to see my kids here in Riverside, Brookfield are going to go and they'll be partially in school and then partially it'll be a hybrid. The reason I said that is because we're going to be uncomfortable and we need to be uncomfortable. And I know that's hard to say to somebody to say, hey, you know what? You're going to need to pivot. You're going to need to learn some things, but we get comfortable as educators a lot, because it's a lot of routine, and it's okay to be comfortable, but the way the system has been going and people are becoming disengaged with it, and there's a lot of confusion of why are we still looking at just numbers and not the human being and the human aspect behind it. This is the place where we can start to shake things up. So for me, the reason I tweeted that is because I'm going to be completely uncomfortable this year. I'm going to be starting a new school. It's a great match. I'm not saying this just because I'm new and untenured. I don't really abide by those rules. I'm just like, these people in the school are very, very excited and they want to try some new things, and it's a good community. But then I have to meet some students virtually, and now I'm going to be challenged to figure that out as well. So in pain and going through the growing processes, that's really where you learn, right? So that's why I'm super excited about this year.
Well, that sounds great. I think it's interesting because really what COVID did do is it really highlighted the rigidity of the structure that we have and how inflexible it is to adapt to the changes in the world, which we know that the economy's been changing so fast, and we've talked about this before, Peter. So what do you think is the mood with your fellow teachers in terms of their approach to teaching this year? I know the heart of teachers, God bless you, it is the most important job and the most thankless job and the hardest job, because you don't go into it because you want to be some millionaire. You go into it because you care about these kids. Mm-hmm. So give us a sense of what you think the mood is with your fellow teachers, maybe not just in your school, but in the broader sense, and how they're looking at this as an opportunity or as clinging to the rope as the ship goes down.
You're right. That's exactly the division, what you just explained there. You're either on board with this or you're fighting, and you can fight all you want. It's just a lot of things that you can't control. It's interesting. The general consensus when we came out of this in the spring, we didn't know what the heck hit us, in the system. And it was interesting because the people who are project-based and human-based, they did pretty well. There's a lot of things here in Illinois where the governor said, okay, they can't get lower than the grade, and that was the only thing holding on to people. And of course, people checked out. Like if I was 17, I'd be like, oh, I got a A-, hey, I'm done. See ya. It's been a great year. But and then there's also the other pieces that are the traditional pieces for like your seniors and the proms and those types of things that really hit people. It hit staff as well, because they're like, you mourn that, you go through the process. So spinning in the summer, it probably wasn't the best time to hit if we had a choice of when it was going to hit, because in your mind, you're thinking all the way through summer, right? If you're not a year-round school, you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going to happen? A lot of questions. And then, so you can either look at the things you can control and try to control those, or you can just kind of get over here in this uncontrollable. So that's kind of the consensus. So there was a lot of angst, a lot of sleepless nights in the summer. I will tell you, it was, a lot of people just didn't talk about it. A lot of my teachers friends, we just kind of like, all right, we'll get through this. We're with our families, we're safe. Let's, hope everything's okay. I love to get in the mud and just play around. And, you know, more teachers than not right now, I will tell you, are in the mud and they know what they can control and what they can't control. We're having a challenge of how we're going to take attendance right now. And a lot of people will spin on it, but then some people will be like, you know what, we're probably going to mess this up for 2 weeks. And so people are starting to learn the agile way, you know, of doing things. And so to answer your question, I think more people are starting to shift into, okay, you know, we really can't control all of this. And you're going to have some hard holdouters out there that are like, you know, no, we got to do it this way, and it's not going to work. But I think the transformation is happening. So anybody and everybody that I'm talking with and speaking with I'm trying to give them, okay, here's the glass half full. Let's see what we can do. And you really have to be excited about it. My business partner from HallPass, we'll talk about this in a minute, but she, Audrey Boyle, threw out there's no more passive aggressive anymore, right? So when something big happens, you can't just say, oh, this student isn't really learning or whatever. No, you have to perform. And as an educator, I like to think of us not as teachers anymore. We are now becoming accountability partners. We're becoming people who are really there for the student individually. The knowledge, we kind of already knew it was there. We didn't hold it. So I think that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow because a lot of people are actually afraid. They're not only afraid of, you know, possibly getting ill with this thing, but they're afraid of, you know, not being a meaningful person who can help others, and they are. And I think that's where the biggest pivot's going to come into.
So with that shift and what's actually happened with the pandemic, and when you think about the question that Pam and I always talk about, which is, what does it mean to be educated in the 21st century? So when you think about your experience over 20 years, we understand why you started the podcast, and you're working in a field of business and entrepreneurship. So we think those are skills that students need. What would you say? How would you respond? What would be your answer to what does it mean to be educated in the 21st century?
I can give you two things. And I actually learned this in Europe 5 years ago when we were at this huge educational forum. Creative problem solvers and adaptable to change. And that's what's happening right now in the system. And I think those are two of the biggest things. You look on any list, they're going to be on any employer's list, entrepreneur's list, or anything like that. Now, again, I come in this with a lens of 9 to 12th grade. But I think it can actually work. Actually, I know it can work, you know, through the entire system. It's going to take a lot of, you know, different avenues to do that. We got away from, you know, really giving students an opportunity to show what they are, you know, they're pursuing. I don't like, you know, passion is, but what is their purpose, and trying to have them figure out what their why is. And we got into check boxes and, you know, the college realm, the AP realm, and those work for a percentage of our kids. But I don't think those work for a large percentage of our kids. There are kids like me, like I just was able to check the boxes. I was able to slide through. I didn't get into my #1 school and those types of things. But I eventually got there. And I think that people are realizing this whole thing isn't a race. It's really, let's try to figure out where kids are right now, and let's try to move them. And the hard part really is individually doing that and becoming a mentor, becoming an accountability partner, like I said, and then attaching the subjects to that. So understanding that, you know, failure is good. I mean, failure is good, as long as it's not like a terminal failure. But like if you're screwing up, let's dive deep into that. And we got away from that. So it's funny, I think like it was almost the 19th century, maybe, I don't know, but we're coming back into that. And I think this is, again, going back to that tweet, is why I'm super excited about this year, because we are forced to pivot. We have to look at things different, and we can learn aside with, I've learned more from my students than any school has provided me, any school, hands down. So yeah, like there's a reason I'm on podcasts. There's a reason why I know, you know, how to use, you know, well, not TikTok too much, but like Instagram and those things. Like the students are actually teaching me this, and that's the beauty of it.
That's awesome. I was taking Joe Bowler's 21st Century Teaching and Learning, and she talks so much about your brain when it makes mistakes, that is when it fires, and the danger of not allowing for mistakes. So as a teacher in a system where the entire culture values the right answer, and the amount of time and energy that is focused on the right answer, and the validation they get as a student and the teachers get in terms of being able to push their kids through the culturally accepted protocol of grades and all of that says that they're a good teacher. So how do you mix failure into that?
I fail right away in front of them. I really do. And as a matter of fact, I like tell them about my failures in life and how I continue to fail. I think it's actually, this year it's going to be easier to do that. Because you're going to be failing in front of them constantly. Like our meet call is going to go down, or the internet's not going to be working at 3 of our kids' classes or in their homes or whatever. So we're gonna have to fail and use that. Okay, what's another way that we can look at this? So I think it's going to be easier. It is a slow change. You do see a lot of teachers who are the owner of knowledge start to realize that, you know what? A real win in a classroom isn't a grade. It isn't actually, how much this kid got on an SAT or an ACT. That's not really the real win. As a matter of fact, that was one of my failures. I got a 790 on my SAT. I barely spelled my name right on this thing. I had a baseball game in the afternoon. I can make up all the excuses you want, but I just wasn't into it. I didn't think it had meaning. Well, it does, but so going back into that, I use that as a failure. So I think a lot of educators are really starting to understand, okay, we're going to fail. So when you make it safe to fail, and then you teach the learning beyond it, I think that's really what makes an educator a true educator. I can have any type of kids, and we feel the pressure. And I think that's why a lot of educators in the system get really down or maybe even bolt out of the system, is because they feel the pressure. Like, you have to have, why are your kids failing, or why do they all have this GPA, and we're rated on that, where, if you dig into that kid and start asking them questions about who they are and where they come from, what are they experienced, and what are their purpose, what are their passion right now, what are they interested in, you can change. I've taken D&F students and sat down in post high school, and one of my, Calvin's a young man, I won't say his last name, but he is a kid who just didn't do high school. And I'm telling you, if this kid took a test at Harvard, he'd pass. Like, he is extremely well-read, and he just didn't care. But no one really asked him those questions in school. And I think that's what makes an educator. So I fail in front of them, make it safe to fail, because now they're gonna actually build forward, and they're gonna fail forward.
So out of curiosity, what the example that you just gave, how many teachers in your building, well, you're going into a new building, so it's going to be new, but it's very refreshing to hear what you're talking about. And it's very much like what happens in athletics. So if you're a baseball player, I'm not sure what position you played, if you're an outfielder, pitcher, whatever it might be, the opportunity to fail is constant. However, the opportunity to make up for that failure is also constant. And that's where the learning takes place. So I'm just curious, like, how many teachers going into the new building do you think have the same attitude that you do?
Man, that's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, the people I'm talking with, I will tell you, the administration there is pretty amazing, because they have to be, and that's a job you do not want right now.
No.
A lot of the administrators, I mean, it was funny. I was sitting down with my colleague, and yesterday was our first day where we are actually going into school. We're masking up as educators, and we're working together, and I kind of like it. A lot of people are like, I feel like, I would like a little more flexible schedule. Well, that's cool. But I was sitting down with my colleague, and he was like, let me tell you about the superintendent, man. He's a good guy. He does really great things. And then right after that, the superintendent came on. He's like, I'm retiring after this year.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, but our principal and a lot of the principals that I know, they know you can't win. This is but you have to look at the small wins and say, all right, we're gonna pivot. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like we're trying to build that. You know, in a couple of my other schools, I have a lot of friends who are teachers. Man, they're slowly coming around. They really are. And but there are still those ones that are just fighting. And I honestly, I have looked at Twitter for the last, obviously, you know, coming into this for, you know, since March 13th, and you're just trying to, you know, connect with people. I'm seeing, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because I don't know who these teachers are, but if they're on Twitter, they're usually a little bit, you know, more advanced, but they're leaving the profession. And that's scary as well, because we already have a challenge here. So I think we do need to start looking at the system as a whole. I know that, you know that, but I think, you know, we really need to start taking a look at this whole thing. So I would say, though, overall, I think it's now, you know we can't fly this thing. It's fight or flight, and we got to get in here and really try to help these kids.
To what extent, given that, because your goal is to connect, you know, the academia to reality, might this be an opportunity? I mean, to get, while kids are actually in the real world, not physically in school, to do things in the environment. I mean, to a certain extent, it's not quite like real world, but where people are taking on internships and jobs and that. But to what extent can you utilize this time to, you know, further your mission of connecting those two?
You know, that's a great question. And I think more and more the workspaces that we are in, if you've never been outside of a school, we're still kind of working on that old kind of corporate look. And I don't mean all corporate is old, you know, you have your newer companies, but you get up, you go to here, you have a break, and, you know, it's your old, you know, I'm working at Ford and I'm on the assembly line kind of deal. And then, you know, it started to change a little bit, but you're still looking at that old school corporate culture, right? And now I think one of the best ways that I can come into this as an educator, and not only that, but as a business educator, is, I was just talking to my colleague about this. We have to teach the students your focus management right now. Like that, there's your skill. And, you know, I even had a conversation with my son, like in the springtime, he was struggling because his room is where his computer is. And it's like, that's his getaway place. But now it became his school place. And he's struggling with that. So now I think that's where the opportunity lies, because, you know, more and more we're flexible workspace. We're there before this whole thing hit. And now they're becoming more and more apparent with the technology. I mean, we're on a podcast here, you know, connecting, you know, I've talked to students from class, from home or at school, and it's all changing, but it's given them that glimpse of the way business really is. And unfortunately, a lot of the educators who are even great educators go right in from college. You know, they're school, right into teaching school, and they've never really got a good taste of, unless they have a spouse or somebody who's working outside. And I think that's a big mistake. I think all of our teachers and educators should have some sort of outside, you know, they can't go right into this because they're not really seeing what's out there. And I think maybe that's just the way we redesign school, where we have, you know, educators are actually professional people, who knows? But yeah, I think that's the biggest piece, is where you're working from, and your focus management right now is where I bring reality to academia, because you had to perform, and now it's right in front of them.
Well, Peter, that's a great point. I think that's a great place to stop here. We're going to go into part 2, where we carry on the conversation about the future of business and how education manages that process for students, while also preparing teachers, like you said, and then what happens to the current teachers. So you just brought up a lot there.
We have a lot to talk about. Stay tuned.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us in part 1 with Peter Hostrawser, a disruptor of education. But really what that means is he is enhancing the process for students. So we applaud you for all that you're doing, Peter.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
impressive. We need to clone you. That sounds great. Okay, we'll see you next time.